A Panama-flagged tanker was airborne boarded, its comms isolated, and its crew contained in minutes. No missiles, no headlines, just a decisive seizure. Then it happened again days later. Same region, same method. This wasn't a fluke. You're about to see how a layered U.S. Navy Coast Guard mission turned sanctions into a moving wall at sea, targeting Venezuelan crude on long-haul routes bound for Asia. We'll reveal the timing, the inter-service choreography, and the quiet message to insurers and brokers. Your risk model is now obsolete. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. A tanker with a clean name never hits a sanctions list, yet a boarding team still lands on its deck before dawn. What gave it away wasn't a line in a database. It was the trail it left on the water and in the paperwork that tries to hide it. The pattern starts with flags that blend in. Panama shows up on the stern, because it's common enough to avoid stares and flexible enough to switch if pressure builds. Ownership hides behind layers. An office suite in Dubai on paper, a shelf company in the Caribbean, a manager that changes every quarter. The automatic identification system blinks off near Venezuelan waters, then pops back on south of the Azores, with a route line that stretches toward the South China Sea. No open declaration, but the cargo depth, draft change, and timing match a lift from a Venezuelan terminal that never logs a public departure. So if the hull isn't listed, why risk an interdiction? Because enforcement moved off the spreadsheet. The teams at sea don't wait for a published designation to catch up. They use intelligence-led thresholds, behavior analysis, cargo profiles, and ownership link charts to build probable cause. It's not a guess. It's a dossier with timestamps, satellite tracks, and payment routing that points to crude of Venezuelan origin moving to buyers who accept the risk when others won't. The westbound route matters. Moving crude toward Asia puts distance between the source and the buyer and tucks the voyage into lanes crowded with legitimate traffic. Independent refiners in China can take discounted barrels if delivery looks plausible and financing clears. To make that happen, traders blend cargo in layers, conduct ship-to-ship transfers off busy anchorages, and slot in insurers whose paperwork leaves origin fields gray. The cargo becomes a number on a bill of lading that does not say Venezuela, yet samples, density, and sulfur content still whisper where it came from. This isn't the first time off-list action set the pace. Prior cases show seizures and legal moves built on intelligence packages, not just names on a page. The point is to disrupt the trade in motion, not announce it after the fact. Operations trend early, pre-dawn for a reason. Fewer eyes, calmer seas, and a crew still in routine. You gain the bridge and engineering before a distress call ripples out, before valves close or data gets wiped. Why target off-list? Because evasion lives on speed and fog. Teams act when patterns align. Consistent AIS gaps at the same coordinates, repeat bunkering partners, a charter history that matches sanctions windows, and cargo signatures that fit a known blend. That threshold triggers action while the tanker is still in reach. Intelligence points the way, but it doesn't open the hatch. The next piece is how a boarding becomes lawful hundreds of miles from port, and why the clock between first radar paint and the ladder hitting the rail is measured in minutes, not hours. At 5:20 a.m., the helicopter settles into a hover and the boarding team drops fast. But the real edge is paperwork and jurisdiction. The Navy owns the water around the ship and the sky above it. The Coast Guard steps on board with the authority to call the shots. That division is deliberate. One force controls the battle space. The other makes the case stick. The mission stacks in layers. A gray hull rides a few cables off the tanker's beam to anchor the scene. Air crews keep an orbit tight enough to watch every ladder and hatch. The Coast Guard team rides the lift, because they bring the legal backbone and the boarding skill set. This is a combined plan designed to be calm and fast, with clear roles so there's no guesswork when boots hit steel. How do you stop a moving target without spooking every shipowner listening on VHF? You make silence the tactic. No open hails, no warning passes. The radar track updates every few seconds from over-the-horizon sensors. A cue tips the helicopter in. Ropes hit the deck. A small boat team rises on the lee side as a fallback, but the clock favors the air insert. The sequence is tight. First, radar and AIS are pinned in a log that won't change. The helo team fast ropes to the main deck and moves for the bridge in a straight line. A second element angles for the engine control room. Doors open. The bridge team takes the helm console and engine telegraph. Engineering holds the e-stop and fuel systems. The crew gets mustered midships, accounts taken, hands visible, no one alone. Radios come off belts. Sat phones go into evidence bags, and the watch officer sits with an escort while the logbook stays open. Comms isolation is the hinge. External calls stop. The AIS stays on to show a steady status and avoid raising questions across nearby traffic. The ship's heading and speed remain stable to keep tank pressures and steering routines normal. You don't want a captain trying to reset systems or a chief engineer shutting down pumps in a panic. Stability reduces risk and buys time. Authority makes it legal. The registry on the stern grants a right to verify nationality and documents. U.S. sanctions jurisdiction follows the cargo and the transaction trail. Maritime law allows a right of visit when probable cause is met. That threshold was crossed before dawn. The Coast Guard sights it on scene and records every step. The Navy shields the operation from anyone curious enough to close the distance. Security rings form around the target. The gray hull stays as overwatch. Small boats form a moving picket, keeping civilian traffic out. Air cover watches for fast movers or unplanned guests. All of it rests on rehearsal. Intel briefs the night before set route predictions and the minute-by-minute plan. Teams run the timeline dry, then wet, to shave delays. They gain control fast because 2 points fall at once, the bridge and the engine room, followed by silence on every radio circuit. Custody is declared under Coast Guard lead. The Navy guards the edges. And from that minute forward, the pressure shifts ashore, where traders, insurers, and ministries start making calls. One ship halted off Venezuela, and hours later, refinery desks in Shandong start rewriting delivery windows while traders widen bid-ask spreads. A single interruption becomes a signal. Risk is moving, and it travels faster than the crude in the tanks. Venezuela's budget leans on oil to fund basic imports, payrolls, and currency defenses. When a cargo stalls, cash that was supposed to clear letters of credit doesn't arrive on time. Suppliers press for prepayment. The central bank burns through reserves to steady the exchange rate. A delay measured in days bleeds into procurement schedules for food, parts, and fuel additives. The math is unforgiving when most export revenue depends on barrels leaving on schedule. So why does one seizure rattle a system sitting on vast reserves underground? Because value only crystallizes when oil reaches a paying buyer. Tanks at the wellhead don't cover invoices. When the voyage timeline breaks, every counterparty reprices their exposure. That starts a chain that costs more than the oil in any single hull. Insurers react first. War risk premia step up. Underwriters add exclusions for AIS gaps and opaque chartering trails. Brokers update clauses to include clean drafting warranties and mid-voyage audit rights. Shipowners quietly reroute or decline fixtures that touch suspect load zones. Buyers start hedging with alternative crudes that can arrive predictably, even if they're pricier, just to keep runs steady. In Asia, the effect is concrete. Chinese independent refiners that count on flexible deliveries face wider arrival windows and new inspection holds. Schedules slip. If a unit counts on medium sour barrels by the 18th and the slot turns uncertain, planners shuffle slate, buy a replacement cargo at a premium, or cut runs. Each choice has a cost. Yield losses, higher feedstock prices, or idle capacity. Contracts do not vanish. They get amended. Delivery laycans stretch. Quality tolerances tighten, and penalties for non-delivery creep in. Compliance teams move next. Monitoring flags tighten around dark activity and recycled shell owners. Anomalous draft changes trigger manual reviews. Even ships with no public designation get flagged for internal sanctions holds. Cargoes sit at anchor waiting for bank approvals that used to be automatic. Traders feel it as time. Time that accrues demurrage, raises financing charges, and shifts mark-to-market values as futures curves respond to delivery doubt. All of this adds up. A week's delay can stack 6 figures in demurrage and interest. Multiply by multiple voyages, and the carrying cost eats into the discount that made the trade attractive. Meanwhile, price risk rises with each rumor of another interception. Spreads wobble, bases change, the margin shrinks. Repeatable, quiet boardings turn into leverage. Without gunfire, they create a moving wall that forces the market to adapt to enforcement, not the other way around. Caracas feels it quickly because cash cycles tighten. Salaries, imports, and currency support rely on predictable inflows. Uncertainty amplifies political strain and tells global buyers the corridor is contested. The signal lands. Now the question is whether shippers retool their routes and paperwork or wait this out from the sidelines. Power at sea now runs on timing, paperwork, and precision. When you control the flow, who lifts, who pays, who arrives on time, you move the politics without firing a shot. Intercepts before sunrise, airtight documentation, and custody that holds in court push decisions in boardrooms and ministries. Watch the risk models. If off-list tankers keep getting stopped, routes will bend, premiums will rise, and the real map of energy trade shifts line by line. Track who pauses fixtures and who rewrites clauses. 2 seizures set the tone. What shippers accept next and what buyers tolerate will decide where the money and the power goes.